On this episode of Law Weekly, we celebrate an outstanding jurist, the Honorable Justice Mary Odili, who recently retired from the Supreme Court after clocking the mandatory retirement age of 70. Channels Television partnered with the leadership of the Nigerian Bar Association Women Forum to dig deep into the life of the jurist, her time on the bench, and much more. I co-anchored the conversation alongside Mrs. Folashade Ali, the head of the Advocacy Committee of the NBAWF. I am Shola Sheyeli. Welcome to the program. First, let's begin with some background information about our celebrant. Justice Mary Odili was born May 12, 1952 in Imo State to Bernard and Benedict Nzenwa. She describes her father as a lawyer and a footballer who later became a traditional ruler, while her mother, who she credits with ensuring that she got the best education possible, was a seamstress and trader. The young Mary attended the Mbise Girls Secondary School and later enrolled at the Queen of the Rosary College in Onitsha for her A-levels. In 1972, she gained admission into the University of Nigeria Enugu campus, where she read law, and it was on this campus she met Peter Odili, a medical student at the time. In 1976, she attended the Nigerian Law School, Lagos, and was called to the bar in July 1977. 2 months later, she married Dr. Peter Odili.
My background, I am a Catholic of the Christian faith, and I also was lucky to marry a Catholic. And so we didn't have a problem which would occur where there's divergence in faith. And so I had always been brought up to be prayerful. So the rosary, for us Catholics, the rosary is our talisman round the clock. And I was fortunate to marry a man who was even more prayerful than myself, a man of faith. Right from the very beginning, Peter believed there's nothing God cannot do. In fact, that aspect I marveled. It was from him I learned to have faith, and strong faith. Because when he came to marry me, knowing the traditional customs of where I come from, Mbise, in Imo State, what a bridegroom is expected to produce, a lot of them would need to talk to their bank manager. Something like that. And that was why I was quite afraid in that regard, because he had just graduated. In fact, he graduated in June of 77. I was called to bar July 77. Wow. But we didn't want to give space. And so when I took him to my parents, he naturally, since he came from, if I can term it, foreign land, because my parents nobody had heard of where he came from. Ndoni we heard of Ndoni as a community because of him. We had never heard of the community. But I was in love, so I wasn't interested in where he came from. All I knew was I'm marrying this man. The only problem was Peter now said he wanted the list of the things for the traditional marriage. My father took a look at him, looked at me, and said, "My children, they place both of you for sale in the market. You've just graduated, my daughter has just been called to bar. The proceeds from selling both of you will not start the introduction in our custom. As far as I'm concerned, you have," and interestingly, Peter played first 11. My father had played first 11 in the same school. So my father saw a son. My father said, "You are coming in not as my son-in-law. From day one, you are coming in as my son." Peter was very, very happy, because when he broached the topic to his siblings, they didn't see how an Mbise man who had finished training his daughter as a lawyer who will make it easy for him. And they, like most of us, had come out from the war. And really everyone came out with nothing. So they didn't know how they would be able to mobilize the funds for the elaborate marriage in Mbise land. So he said, no, he will give me. When I finish talking to him, he will give me. And truly, that was exactly what my father did. Like I said, Peter was a man of faith. He brought out his rosary. He had told me, who do you think had been taking care of me since my mother died? His mother died when he was 11. So he always hung on to his rosary.
And 2 years after that union, the couple got pregnant. It was an experience Justice Odili says would go on to shape her life.
I was 26 weeks gone. I had attended antenatal. Everything was fine. I went to work. At that time, I was still in the Ministry of Justice, Benin, because I was trying to finish the extension, the 4 months extension I had. I went to work, and Peter said I should invite my colleagues for lunch. It was a Monday. And I went back home, prepared the lunch. I was so happy. And they came over. We had lunch. And in the night, I felt slightly uncomfortable. And we went to bed. That was the last I knew. When I woke up, I found myself in a small hospital bed. I saw a large bandage across my stomach. So I asked, what happened yesterday? And they said, yesterday, today is Friday. You've been in coma. You were in coma for 4 days. Then now Peter told me we had a baby girl, and the drugs, very strong drugs they had injected me with, which the baby ingested, were too strong for her, and she couldn't survive. What the experience showed us was humanity at its zenith, because the doctors, they just couldn't believe. You can imagine where orthopedic surgeons and professors trooped, all sorts of doctors, everyone trooped to the gynae ward to interact with my doctors to find the way forward. And I also heard the nursing students called a meeting and decided, while I was in coma, that every one of them should donate blood. That they have been seeing this young girl in the premises, because we lived in the hospital complex. But when I became the first lady in Rivers State, I realized that God allowed me to have those experiences for the period. And that enabled me have the Safe Motherhood program, which made us reach every nook and corner of this state, interacted with the traditional birth attendants, doctors, gynecologists, and the National Association of Gynecologists gave me an award because they considered me one of them. Mm-hmm. So that tells you that, as they say, in all things you thank God. You never know what He had programmed for what one would have considered a misfortune for the future.
Justice Odili went down memory lane to share with us one of her most memorable judgments.
That was the one I delivered in the High Court, Rivers State. It had to do with the Rumola market. On your way to the airport, you know, there's a market there. Some young people took over, became leaders of the community, and decided to take over the running of the market. And apparently the market was built in the 40s, in the 1940s. And when they built the market in those times, the elders felt that the women were so organized, they would be the best to run and manage the market. And they handed the management and the running to women. So that was the situation from the 1940s till these young people became the executive members of the community, and they felt the market should be handled by them. So it created a crisis in the community, and the women came to court. Interestingly, when they came to court, any day this matter came on, there was always a crowd. And the case was fought viciously by counsel on either side, on both sides. The counsel for the plaintiff said, the thing about this case, if it is not given to us, the plaintiffs, human lives will be lost. The other side said, hey, if we don't get judgment, if the crisis, the violence will start from this court. So I saw myself in the eye of the storm. So we went on, took all the evidence, and at the end of it, I didn't know which way, how to approach the judgment. And the days were going by. So one senior lawyer from the local government, but not from that community, came. He said, "Ma, please don't be offended. It's not that I want to interlope into a case before you that you've adjourned for judgment. I thought what he would bring up would even assist me." He said, "My worry is, my mother comes from the plaintiff's side, my wife from the defendant's side, and because I know what is going on in the community, there's no way, either way, there will not be violence and he would be affected. So, Ma, please look into the case well and see how it can be done." That was when I knew I had to go to God. I didn't use regular prayer. I didn't use the Bible because I was too confused. So I decided to discuss with God. I now presented this. I said, you know how this, that, God is very close to us, even though we don't know. So I said, and they're talking of violence, and if blood is shed, I'll be in the middle of it, and I don't want to be affected by bloodshed. So after that, I went back to the parlor. At that time, my husband, who was already in politics, he was in Abuja. At that time, he was in the Constitutional Conference. So suddenly, I had this urge to go into the room. I had the urge, bring out your pen and paper. And precisely that I started. And as I started writing, I didn't stop till I wrote 28 pages and stopped. Conclusion. I was so happy with myself. So, to me, the judgment was not mine. So I felt I didn't need to read it through before I would come and cancel God's inspiration. So I folded the paper and put it in my bag and carried on life normal. So that day of the judgment, as I got into my chambers, my secretary came in and said, the lawyers said they know the judgment cannot be ready if they will take a date. I said, no, tell them to wait. The judgment is ready. And at 9 o'clock, I went in. The court was full, and there were a lot of other lawyers who had come for other matters. So I started. In fact, as I was reading the judgment, I was surprised at some of the things I saw there. So when I finished, you could hear a pin drop. The whole place was quiet. I now saw the balancing act God had done in that judgment. And so when the lawyer for the plaintiffs thanked me, said they can't believe this judgment. He said he was grateful. The lawyer from the defense stood up, thanking that he cannot believe this has happened. And interestingly, other lawyers also said, even though the case did not concern them, but the way it was flowing, they felt they needed to hear. And they've not seen a more balanced judgment. I was surprised. And when all the litigants and their supporters were leaving, not even the noise of slippers or shoe could you hear. They all went away quietly, and there was peace. So to me, that was the day I saw the God of justice and peace. In our church, they always pray justice and peace, justice and peace. I didn't see how, I thought each stood alone. But that was the day I knew without justice there cannot be peace. And I saw that they are interwoven. That, to me, was my greatest moment, and it has remained so.
How did Justice Odili handle political interference in her job? And what can be done to improve the poor perception that the judiciary is corrupt? The jurist says the politicians sometimes deliberately soil the name of the judiciary when they do not get what they want.
Some politicians do not have red lines, do not see anything sacred they cannot march on. And so to get an advantage, they seek to rubbish the judiciary. It is not true. Judiciary is made up of human beings, men and women. And because they are human beings, there are a few bad eggs, which is expected. And the system, there is a corrective system on ground for them. And so when some people lose their case or they want to get an advantage, they decide, okay, let's attack the judiciary. The interesting thing, like I mentioned 2 days ago, I saw the judgments of those famous judges and magistrates of the old Bendel state, right there. And my mentor, the lady I understudied, Omorodion, who later became a judge, she was Princess Akinzwa before she got married and became Omorodion. I said, Auntie, these record books, why are they like this? She said, they don't belong to those judges. They belong to the state, and they are available to anybody. So I was flipping through and reading. And so if people take the trouble to read the judgments, you will find that there was nothing procured in these judgments. The law stated you will find them there. But it is those who do not see that there are red lines, and in trying to rubbish the judges, you rubbish the institution. And if the judiciary cracks or is destroyed, it is a state of anarchy we're going into, and it is not correct. The judges are working round the clock and not paid properly for the work. I have had cause to write a judgment till morning, and the following morning go to work. All that is there. And only people now, oh, yeah, what do you expect? Like I said, like the Bayelsa judgment they wanted to kill me and my family for was God at work. There was no other thing to do than to give it to the man the law said should be given to him. And that is the truth of the matter. Like I said, my history, having done 4 days coma, that I cannot explain what happened in those 4 days. That experience, not to talk about reading the law reports of the famous men and women made me do everything right, because my own judgments are now public. And so these two experiences defined the way I had to follow every inch of the way. So no matter who I was related to or who was relating with my husband, in fact, we've lost some friends on account of, oh, the case is in your wife's court. And Peter will say, please, I don't, that he gave a pledge to Ovie whiskey. And he wasn't prepared to interfere. So I didn't have conflicts of interest.
The issue of gender bias and discrimination also came up. Here's what Justice Odili had to say on the issue.
I never had discrimination. From my student days in the university or my journey through the magistracy to the apex court. I think God was at play. Because what I found out that may be affecting some women in this matter of gender discrimination, some of our women may not be faultless. Some of them carry the gender flag as if either it shows they are an underdog that should be given, yes. I have found the menfolk in the course of the magistracy, High Court, Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court. Once you do your work, you do your bit, and don't try to push, oh, you know, my children, my husband, I have to do this, that's why I couldn't be at work in time. Or like in the appellate court where it's teamwork. Oh, my judgment, I couldn't distribute them in time because. Since the men don't bring up such because, why should we? So you adjust and know how to go about carrying out those duties. It's a question of adjusting. It's like God has created each and every one of us. I would say without contradiction, there's none of us who does not have one disability or the other. It is what you do, balancing that disability with your excellence in other fields, that brings out the balance and makes you excel. And so it is with juggling family life with the profession. When the children were very young, I didn't keep them away to do my judgments. No. I waited for them to be asleep. So during the day, it was me and them. And again, my husband's work helped. In making the rosters for those who would stay night till morning, he used to put his name. So when he would take his call, I was happy. I said, hey, this man has gone. The children are asleep. What am I to do? I carried the law reports, the books. So that's when I started writing judgments and not allowing them lapse. So that's how I coordinated that. You know, these doctors, that's why it's unfortunate that the way they are being treated in Nigeria is very sad. They are at work 24 hours because human health, no one can predict. And then after some time, he entered politics, even though I didn't support him entering politics because I know the family suffers My father was a politician, so I know what we suffered, and I didn't want my children to have the same fate. But he couldn't help jumping in. So he's entering into politics, and you know politicians can have meeting for 48 hours non-stop. So I had all the time. So that helped me. Yes. So the time to write was always available.
She also spoke about the need for young people to have mentors, read widely, and embrace the positives. It's on that note we wrap up today's edition of the program. Don't forget that you can watch these and past episodes on our YouTube page. I am Shola Shoyele. See you next time.